advancing?
Yeah.
Okay.
Small business. And his life as an activist
And
began
this is this on?
opposing the imminent invasion of Iraq in 2003, the same day that our book was published.
Here.
This opposition soon grew to include
Okay,
all
go back.
U.S.
How do we go back then?
militarism,
Forward
empire,
back.
Oh, okay, good.
and the war on the poor and working class, facilitated by a monetary system designed to send everything straight to the top. It's working just the way it's designed to work. The National Association of Social Workers named Dick in 2006 Northwest Indiana Citizen of the Year for his anti-war activism. At last year's conference, he gave his first talk for us, and it was an outstanding presentation on social justice, monetary reform, and he's going to continue that now. His pamphlet, Linking Social Justice to Monetary Reform, is in your conference kit, and there are more at the back of the room. Please welcome Dick Egnatz.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Stephen. Can everybody hear me okay? I'm going to try to put you to sleep here. Linking social justice to monetary reform came about after I had the privilege of speaking here to the American Monetary Institute last year. I couldn't believe it because I thought this was, I had attended the year before. This is my third year. So the first time Stephen called and said, come on, Nick, you got to come to this conference. I'd known him for a few years as a result of our joint activism. And I thought, no, that's got to be for the academics. That's not for a guy like me. But he convinced me to come, and then the next year he invited me to speak, and I talked about social justice and monetary reform. And after last year's thing, I put it into a pamphlet form. Everybody has a copy here. For those that are watching on video, it's available. You could just Google linking social justice to climate change to what? Monetary reform. Linking social justice to monetary reform. It's at alpheus.org, alpheus.org. You could also just find it there. It'll be at the AMI website also. Something to step on down there. So we did the pamphlet, and the pamphlet is an attempt to make monetary reform understandable, to make social justice, to make that connection between the two. Because as we get overwhelmed with social justice issues, we need to find that common issue, the cornerstone upon which to build our opposition to what's going on in our society. Okay, here, I gotta figure this out now. Here we go here. Okay, what is social justice? We're all doing this. Here we go. What is social justice? You know, I've been asked this a couple times before I was, and I had to really think about it. So last night I had to redo my whole program into 20 minutes, and I redid this whole part. Anyway, peace, a fair system where everyone has a chance. No one's left behind, completely behind. No one gets so far ahead that they lose sight of their brothers and sisters. Caring and cooperation are the hallmarks of our society. Mother Earth is cared for and sustained. Let's contrast that with social injustice. War, militarism, empire. Unfair system in which the cards are stacked in favor of the rich. Creation of an ever-expanding class of haves and have-nots. Wealthy have trillions, poor have debt. Or as my father used to say, rich get richer, poor have kids, when we played poker. Market worship and competition are hallmarks of society. Destruction of Mother Earth is outsourced as an externality of profit and production. Social justice, it's economic justice. You can't have one without the other. Economic justice, how can you have a just economic system if the monetary system is unjust? And a just monetary system equals the Need Act. That's what we're going to be talking about. Of course, we've been talking about that in this room for some time, but for some of the people who've been watching on, or are watching on video, hopefully maybe they haven't heard of it yet, so we will get to the Need Act. Let's talk about what kind of a system we have right now. Our monetary system, our money, Virtually all of it is created out of thin air by banks when they make loans. The interest we must pay is not created with the creation of the loan. As the loans are repaid, the money is extinguished into the ether of the atmosphere. It is a system designed to what? To put and keep us in debt, both individually and collectively through our governments. It's not a broken system, it's a system doing what it's designed to do. Within the bank debt money system, okay, it's impossible for us as individuals and our governments to do anything other than get progressively further and further into debt. Money exists only as debt. Just accept that from me, and maybe somebody else will tell us the same thing. Therefore, if we pay off the debts, there is no money in the system. What? There is also not enough money to pay off all the debts. What again? Because money was not created with the loans to pay for the interest. John spoke about that. Even if we were able to pay off all our debts within this system, all the money would be extinguished. There would be no money for society to function. And for anyone to get out of debt within this perverse system, someone else somewhere must take out a loan and go into debt for that money to exist. This is social injustice. It is impossible to pay the debt. How can we pay off the debt? What do we have? We have 21 trillion in total government. That debt includes local and state and federal. 16.9 trillion personal debt. 38 trillion, doesn't count businesses, 38 trillion in total debt. Now, the Federal Reserve, they give us this M2 money supply. Money supply is 12.1 trillion. These are the latest figures that the Federal Reserve had. So we have $38 trillion, and we have to pay it off with a total of 12.1 trillion. That's going to leave us what? 29.9 trillion short of repaying. And if we did that, there wouldn't be any money in the system at all for society and the commerce to function. This is crazy. This is insanity. But you don't have to take my word for it. Mariner S. Eccles, who's this guy? He's on the cover of Time magazine. Of course, that was a few years ago. If I could read Roman numerals real quick, I could tell you what year. But anyway, he was the chairman, former chairman and governor of the Federal Reserve, 33 to 51 during the Great Depression. That is what our money system is. If there were no debts in our money system, there wouldn't be any money. Now, isn't that exactly what I told you? Of course, that's exactly what I told you. And I don't need to show you graphs and flow charts of how the banks are moving their money around or anything like that. We just need to take the word of the establishment people that are telling us, yes, what these guys are saying is the truth. Money exists as debt. Who's this gentleman here? Where did he come from? The Lost Science of Money. Stephen Zarlinga's tour de force book on money. He is the world's preeminent authority on money and money systems. And when he started out, he looked like that. And after seeing how bad they were, it did this to him. But Stephen is a wonderful friend and a great champion of ours. But he's not the star of the show, and we're going to get to the star of the show, ladies and gentlemen. Zarlinga researched and wrote The Lost Science of Money. Used 3,000 years of monetary history. Zarlinga concurred with Aristotle that money exists by law and not by nature, as gold, silver, or banker's fiat. What does that mean? Because at the first conference, they were all saying that, and I was trying to figure it out. I knew by law, I knew what that meant. That meant that money exists, that the government could create money as an abstract quantity. It wasn't backed by anything. Not by nature. Gold, silver, banker's fiat, the nature part, that means money was a commodity. You know, like they talk about a gold standard that was supposedly existed many years ago, et cetera, et cetera. And from that, gold, the bankers saying that they had gold in their vaults, and they went to creating paper notes and giving them out, saying that it was backed by the gold, and they found out that they could give out lots more, and that's where this whole fractional reserve banking scam started from, that the bankers did. They found out that they could lie to us, that they could give out notes that said they were backed by something, they weren't backed by something, and that's how they justify now giving out notes that aren't backed by anything but us. The U.S. government, the full faith of the United States government. I don't even have a bill in my pocket to read. Anyway, Stephen began the American Monetary Institute. He wrote the American Monetary Act and encouraged Dennis Kucinich to put it into legislative form, Congressman Dennis Kucinich. So when I said Stephen wasn't the star of the show, and Dennis Kucinich, who gave a wonderful video presentation for us a little while ago, and he's not the star of the show either. And he is the best damn guy we've had on money in Congress since this Congress has been, since we formed our government. The star of the show, ladies and gentlemen, is in this pamphlet here, and it is called the Need Act. It is what they developed. That is the star of the show. We don't need any other reform. We need this because this gives us what we want. It gives us a decent life that we could pass on to our kids and our grandkids. And if we don't have the Need Act, we're going to continue to go to the other place. Well, let me go back here. Because I didn't say. Dennis Kucinich put it into legislative form as the NEED Act, the National Emergency Employment Defense Act. The NEED Act has 3 reforms. The Federal Reserve System becomes part of the government. That's what most of us think it is now, or did until a short time ago. Bank creation of money as debt is decisively stopped. Banks will only own money that already exists. Again, exactly what most of us have been taught to believe happens now. And the federal government creates and spends into existence U.S. money in non-inflation deflationary amounts for the needs of the nation and its people. Again, what we mistakenly think is now happening. That's the NEED Act. So is the NEED Act, is it radical? Of course, the NEED Act reforms are not radical. They're not radical. They're precisely what most of us have been taught to believe is going on now. And we're going to get into what we've been taught. What is radical is bank creation of our money as debt. That's radical. That is the cancer in our society that needs to be removed. My father was a cancer surgeon. He would have been 100 if he was alive today. He died 10 years ago. He was a cancer surgeon. He knew when you had a cancer, you had to take it out. And the only way to take it out is to change the money system so that money exists from the government as an abstract quantity to benefit our society, and not money exist as debt to make debt slaves out of all of us. That's what this is all about, ladies and gentlemen. That's what social justice is. Well, let's see if anybody else agrees with us. Mariner Eccles agreed with us. Well, here we have the Bank of England. This is the central bank in England, founded in 1694. And what was it founded for? It was founded to finance the king's wars, so they could create the money and loan it to the king. And let's see what they said. Majority of money in the modern economy is created by commercial banks making loans. I could go on about this, but we're on a time constraint. That's what they said. Martin Wolf, Financial Times columnist. And what did he say? He's considered, you look him up on Wikipedia, one of the world's top financial writers. He wrote a column last year, Strip Private Banks of Their Power to Create Our Money. Sounds like these guys agree with us. Martin Wolf agrees with us. Jonathan Adair Turner, UK, was chairman of the Financial Services Authority and all sorts of other government authorities, etc. Anyway, he gave a speech to the Stockholm School of Economics, one of the top establishment schools. And when he's giving this speech, who's he talking to? He's not talking to us guys here. He's not talking to the common man. He's not talking to the working class. He's not talking to the poor. He is talking to the establishment. And he's telling the establishment. What's he telling them? Where is he? Anyway, here he is, right here. He said, modern textbook assumptions are dramatic and wrong. They tend to assume that what banks do is take deposits from household depositors and lend it to borrowers. So he's telling them that they've been lying to us. Their assumptions are wrong in the textbooks. He even talked about it. He went back and got the textbooks and looked them up, and yeah, they are lying. And they assume that they're taking the deposits and lending it to borrowers, but that misses the insight that banks create credit and money and purchasing power. So again, he's telling us the banks create money. And what else? That ignores almost entirely the fact that most credit extension is no longer funding business capital projects. And so what is it funding? Bubbles and speculation. And this is from the horse's mouth. This is not from your activist on a street corner. The Chicago Plan revisited. Chicago Plan, we talked about that. I think some of the other people have talked about that. This was a working paper from the International Monetary Fund. Now, normally this is a group that I'm on the street corner saying, these are bad guys, you know. But they do have some people that have done some great work within there, bringing the light of day to what's going on in the world's monetary system. Jeremy Bennis, Michael Kumhoff, Dr. Michael Kumhoff, who's spoken at this conference, who's attended this conference before. And this working paper here comes to the same basic conclusion as Dr. Yamaguchi's work, and because I had to redo this thing, we didn't get to Dr. Yamaguchi's work, but we'll get to it in a minute, so we can just hold that thought. What is this? War. This is a result of our debt money monetary system created by banks, refugee crises. Isn't this a compelling picture, ladies and gentlemen? Poverty in the United States, austerity, inequality. These are the fruits of our monetary system. Environmental crises, that's a plural. An undemocratic democracy. This is the Illinois senator saying a few years ago, frankly, the banks own Congress. Senator Richard Durbin. Unemployment. And of course, debt. Crushing debt. The Federal Reserve claims to be as soon as I said the Federal Reserve, they responded. It claims to be independent. Where are we here? The Board of Governors is appointed by the President. Only Wall Street insiders or academics thoroughly vetted in the debt money system need to apply. They're not going to put anybody else on that board. You think they'd put Sterling on that board? Of course not. Federal Open Market Committee, that's their decision-making committee. It includes this Board of Governors and 5 of the Fed bank presidents. Always the New York Fed is represented there because Wall Street, you know, they want to make sure that they got their finger on the pulse. And I say independent of who? It's independent of us. Of course it's an independent institution, completely independent of the people. We have no control over it at all. How much does it cost to produce currency and coin? John had spoken about this a little bit, but we want to just kind of go over this very quickly because I've been saying that the banks, and they've been saying it too, that they create our money and they create it out of thin air. But what do? The Bureau of Engraving and Printing currency, we're talking about currency in this thing, and currency is the bills. That's the Federal Reserve notes or the bills. So the currency is produced by the Bureau of Printing and Engraving, and it charges the board, that's the Board of Governors of the Federal Reserve, for the cost of production. So they must give them $1 for $1 and $100 for $100, right? No, these are the costs that, this is from the informing the public about the Federal Reserve. The following cost per denomination, this varies slightly from year to year. So a dollar note now costs 4.9 cents. That's how much they give our government for a dollar note, and a $100 note, 12.3 cents. Pretty good, isn't it? The only real money is the coins in our pockets. And why is that the real money? Because the Federal Reserve banks purchase these coins at face value. So for a roll of quarters, you get 10 bucks. For 1 quarter, you get a quarter. Now, when you're buying those when they're buying the Federal Reserve notes, what do they pay for 2 $100 bills? 12.3 times 2, 24.6 cents. They pay the government more for a quarter than they do for 2 $100 bills. Is that the kind of monetary system we want? This is absolute insanity for us. What the NEED Act does is social justice. They're the same. It creates 10 million new good-paying jobs. It may create many, many more. Jamie went into that, but that's a minimum figure. Rebuilding our country's crumbling infrastructure. And before I get in any further, because maybe I'll forget it or I'll get cut out before, but this is rebuilding, and I'm so glad that Jamie brought this out, that the American Society of Civil Engineers wants to rebuild the infrastructure in a sustainable manner, that they've made that commitment over the decades. Gives every man, woman, and child a citizen's dividend, should be 10 grand. And who does that bail out? Well, it bails us out for one thing, and we certainly need bailing out. Maybe those of us in this room don't particularly need it so much, so direly right now, but maybe a few of us do. But certainly we all have brothers and sisters and neighbors and people that we don't know in our communities that have been completely bypassed by this criminal system. But it also bails out me. When I'm not working anymore, but I've been a small businessman off and on for most of my life. It bails out small businessmen because what small businesses need, we don't need loans that we can't repay. We need our customers, the people in our communities, to have money in their pockets for the goods and services that we produce for you. That's what we want. We want a fair deal. And it commits to funding education and health care. It sends 25% of the newly created money to the states. Illinois is in this huge, huge deficit program that they can't get out of. The legislature and the governor are at odds. And the same thing with the city of Chicago. They have the same things. And this provides interest-free financing for local governments to build schools, roads, libraries. Instead of closing these things, we could be building them. We just found Dr. Yamaguchi, the academic, and then we found this guy. Do you recognize him? I don't know if you recognize him. I don't know if you recognize him, so I bought a little hat here so everybody would know who the heck I am. I got dressed up to give this presentation, but I'm very, very comfortable in this outfit. And in fact, before I came here this week, my wife said, "Are you going to wear short pants?" Because I've been wearing them all summer, I don't, a wedding, maybe I'll get dressed up or whatever. Dr. Yamaguchi is an academic, and we need the academics. And I think I mentioned before I came to the first conference, I thought it was for academics, etc. No, this conference is for activists to come and to work with the academics to get what our society needs. Here's Dr. Yamaguchi here. He put the AFC, American Society of Civil Engineers Infrastructure Repairs, into his advanced system dynamic computer model, and he is an international expert on this system dynamics computer model stuff. In fact, he graced us a couple months ago, I believe it was in July. He had been invited from Japan to go give a talk at MIT at a conference, MIT at a conference that they were having, and he stopped here on the way back and gave a presentation to us. So he's internationally recognized as this. His conclusion, infrastructure repairs can be done, national debt can be paid off as it comes due without causing any inflation. Now, nobody in our two corporate political parties, and I'm so glad that I just recently joined the Green Party with our friends here, nobody in our two corporate political parties has any kind of a plan to pay off the national debt. But the NEED Act does. So we're not just talking to progressives, Greens, and people that want social justice. I'm so glad to have them in our audience. Who are we talking to? We're talking to liberals. We're talking, conservatives and libertarians, because they want to pay off the national debt. That's their number one economic issue, is to pay off the national debt. And here we've got something that does it. And we don't have to borrow any money for it. Nobody in either corporate political party has a plan that funds putting 10 million of our people to work, or maybe probably a lot more than that. But the NEED Act does. That's why we need the NEED Act. The result of a debt money system that's tone deaf to the environment. 9 planetary boundaries. Somewhere in our things we have a paper, this paper right here, 9 planetary boundaries. You may want to look at it. We're not going to go into great detail. This was the result of reading this book, The Ecological Rift, by John Bellamy Foster, Brett Clark, and Richard York. And what they did was they put together research by environmental scientists here, James Hansen, Paul Crutzen, Johan Rockström of the Stockholm Resilience Center. 42 other scientists signed on with this. And this is kind of the cliff notes for it. But there are 9 planetary boundaries that are either have been breached by what we're doing to the atmosphere, or are in danger of being breached. And we need to get these under control. Climate change, biodiversity, that's the species loss, nitrogen, phosphorus cycles, and ocean acidification. all dealing with dam, and these first three have already been breached. That means that they've gone past the point of where we can control exactly what's going to happen in the future. So we really have to get them under control. And these three are all dealing with the oceans and what's happening in the oceans. The oceans are dying. Dead zones in the ocean. Acid in the ocean. Massive die-downs of shellfish. And these two, freshwater use and land use, this is how much water, fresh water, out of the total fresh water in the world that humans use. And if it gets too high, then that's going to cause a loss of ecosystems. The same thing with land use for crops for humans. If that gets too high, again, that's going to be endanger ecosystems all over. Then chemical pollution. I don't even remember, it's listed here, but it includes what? Nuclear pollution. I think that is certainly, we certainly know what the depleted uranium is causing. It's causing cancer. Everywhere we're exploding shells. Our boys are exploding shells overseas, causing cancers there. But there's other chemical pollutions in the atmosphere. The last three they don't really have a measurement for. They just know that they're tremendously crucial, and we have to watch ourselves. Atmospheric aerosol loading deals with particulate matter of different kinds in the atmosphere, and it leads to disruption of the climate change there, monsoon cycles, and what else? Health hazards. Health hazards. Who has health hazards? I've got asthma. You have a kid or a grandkid who has asthma, we have an epidemic of asthma. So these things have to be addressed, and they can only be addressed with this. Okay, what happened? I'm pushing the wrong button, that's what happened. Environmental crises can only be addressed with a democratic money system, and that is the NEED Act. And here we've got war again here. Just let's not forget about the wars. Now the Green Party platform supports the NEED Act. Here for the Green Party platform. I'm punchy really. I better read here because I can read, I don't have my glasses on. In 2010, they voted and adopted greening the dollar to the party platform. It is essentially the three necessary reforms of the NEED Act. We hope that Green Party members and candidates are outspoken advocates of the NEED Act, because that's what gives us what we need, the entire range of social justice issues to be handled, that we can handle them. Jill Stein ran last year, or 2012. She's running again for their nomination for president. She wants to do some good work here, but on the other hand, wouldn't it be simpler? What we want Jill Stein to do is just say, let's say that I support the NEED Act because it's in the party platform and it gives us what we want and it covers the full range. And that's what we want to do there. We don't want any partial reforms. War and militarism can only be covered by the NEED Act. The NEED Act was written as nonpartisan legislation. Moving the NEED Act forward, that's for us. It's not for the weak of heart. Not a single member of Congress from the two corporate political parties supports it, and I'm going to tell you that that's not a negative. And you're going to say you're nuts. How could that be a negative? Only 14% of the people approve of what Congress is doing. 82% disapprove. I want to be on board with something that the people disapprove of, what Congress is doing. When the public becomes outraged over our educational activist efforts to the bank's debt money scam, Congress will follow suit. And why is it necessary to enact all three, almost done, Stephen, all three necessary reforms of the NEED Act? Historically, partial reforms haven't worked. And it's important to see this. We've already seen what the three reforms are. And here's the partial reforms when they tried it. The Bank of England was nationalized after 2 world wars in 1946. That was reform 1. But because bank creation of money was not stopped, reform number 2, they didn't do number 2. Private banks now still create 97% of the UK's money. Now, in the 1830s, Jackson and Van Buren revoked the Second Bank of the U.S.'s charter, effectively ending most bank-created money at the time. They did reform number 2, but because they misunderstood the true nature of money, they thought it was gold. They failed to create and spend debt-free money into existence, reform number 3. And then the last one, debt-free greenbacks Reform number 3 were created under Lincoln to fight the Civil War and save the nation. They did it, but because bank creation of money. Reform number 2 was not decisively stopped. The bankers eventually got the upper hand and quashed the greenbacks. And thank you, Howie Hawkins, for giving us the history behind those greenbacks, too. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Take my head off. Okay.